Okay.
Okay, I wanted to, this was not originally what I was planning on presenting, and then this hit me yesterday because I've been involved in doing a 3D printed kit. So I thought I'd share. I remember a long time ago when I first joined the club, I shared about resin models. His name escapes me, but he just said that's kind of like cheating, right? You don't have to build anything; it's already there for you. Once you struggle with these, then yeah, maybe it's cheating a little bit, or maybe it's just a different technique and a different technology, for what you're trying to achieve. And if you're trying to achieve steel-hulled vessels, you're not going to be able to do that with wood like you can with resins. So I am a consumer. I am not an expert on 3D printing. I've never printed anything. I've never designed anything. In the club, John Wild has. He's done a few things. He jumped into it fairly early, and then we have guys in IPMS Tidewater that are designers and printers as well. So mostly figure modeling, but large-sized sculptures. So, okay, next then. This is, 3D printing, if you haven't been following it, is really taken off in leaps and bounds. About 15 years ago, it kind of exploded onto the marketplace, mostly focused on aftermarket products. A more accurate gun turret for the monitor with the entire interior, is available and things like that. To complete replacement islands for aircraft carrier models. So if you had the model of the Yorktown, but you wanted the Enterprise, or the Enterprise and you wanted the Yorktown, because every ship was different, then these designers would then use plans and capture that difference and then 3D print it out, so you didn't have to scratch build out of styrene a replacement superstructure, or island in that case. There was a company called Shapeways that was around until 2024, and they provided a printing service, and it was like Etsy of 3D modeling, and you could go on there, pick a designer, look through their catalog, get stuff done. I missed it dearly, but it went bankrupt in 2024 because it branched out of a commercial company that was producing 3D printed products, and then offered this on the side, and it just became too much. It has re-emerged, but it hasn't really gotten back into the Etsy-like environment that you may have become accustomed to. And there's some designers that have fallen off the face of the earth. I wish they'd reappear because I like their products and I wanted to get more. So, like anything else, quality print needs good design. If you got bad data, you're going to get a bad model. Okay? And if you want a long lecture on that, just ask Dave Baker about it, and he'll tell you. So there's two facets. One is get good lines. And then sometimes if you're doing modern ships, getting good lines is not easy. If you're doing old ships, getting good lines may not be easy. Then the other one is poor rendering. It's how you set up the model in the computer, the CAD, so that it will then print in a way that it will faithfully replicate what you're trying to print. If you don't get it right, you get undercuts, you get other things, you're going to get problems in the printing process. I don't do design. I don't have the time and effort to jump on the computer and spend a lot of time designing. So I'm just a consumer, and I use what other people produce for me. Better print resolution gives you better fidelity. So if it takes longer to print, and that's either more lines of plastic laid down or more layers in the print process, then you'll get much better fidelity, you'll get more truer curves, you'll get less ridges and other issues that then you would have to clean up on the tail end. So always better resolution, but that means it's going to take more material and it's going to take more time to print, which will drive up costs. The other thing that can happen is, and I've seen this, I have one model I did not bring in, where the hull was 3D printed and then and then a mold was made and it was cast. and all the imperfections in the 3D printing process are carried forward in the resin cast. So I've seen the same with traditional resin models where the guy mastered the ship out of wood and used a piece of tape on the hull, and he forgot to remove it, and he went and cast the hull, and there's this impression of a little bit of Scotch tape on his hull that you had to then sand away and buff out. So the two most common processes, there's a lot of 3D printing out there. You can do all kinds of materials. You can do food to metals. I'm just focusing on resin and ships, plastic and resin and ship, the common ship kind. And I know it's evolved over the years, and I cannot talk intelligently about the evolution. But I can tell you right now, we got two that are being used. Fused deposition modeling, that's where you use a wire of plastic that's heated and then laid down, and then the next pass, and the next pass is to build up the model. You see those for sale on eBay and other places. And again, resolution's your key. You get a low resolution model, it's going to look like somebody took a bunch of Play-Doh together. And I'll show you an example of that. And then you have stereolithography, mask stereolithography, or digital light processing, where you're using either lasers or you're using ultraviolet, some other type of light to cure the resin. And I'll talk about that. Any questions before I move on? Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so we talked about fused deposition modeling. Here's an example. What is it? If you use multiple sources, it's not pirating, you're just researching. Is that what I said? Okay. So you use spools of soft plastic and the melting, plastic filaments deposit, like we talked about. And you got the spool that goes there, and this is the heat extrusion head that's then going to make it soft enough so as it lays down, as it cools, it fuses into the layer below. It is a slow building process. It's good for large items. And I have a ship model example that uses the two examples that use that process. It has less details and you get more striations. The issue with the striations is, depending on the type of plastic being used, that it may be hard to smooth out the finish. So, and you'll be able to come up and see that on this one in particular. And then, as I mentioned, low resolution, you get a stringy appearance. In some cases, I have bought models off of eBay for model railroading, and it looks like a silly string creation. I was like, man, they didn't represent that when they sold it to me. Next one. So stereolithography, and I'm just using those all lumped together. Stereolithography uses lasers. Mask stereolithography uses ultraviolet. The laser version, what you're using is a resin bath. And you had a bed plate and that it builds off of. And so the laser, you're focusing the laser from above, and the item is slowly sinking into the bath, and you're building it up. With MSL, which has become very common, and this model is built with MSL, it's inverted. So it actually, as the tray rises, the parts are hanging down. And then you got to invert it to get them off. Again, what it's using is layers in this case. Thousands and thousands of layers, the better the definition, the better the resolution of the model. Or the more layers, the better the definition. The resin used matters for a couple of reasons. One is you want a resin that's going to faithfully execute a lot of the details that you want pre-printed. Watertight doors, scuttles, locations for, I've seen some models where you actually, all the air intakes and everything else are all pre-printed onto the vessel. It's a very slow build process. Got to get it right, because if you don't, there's a lot of places for it to go wrong. So standard resin, what we're used to, gives you a really nice quality. And in the early days of Shapeways, they went with they kept refining the type of resin they used, but at the end of the day, it was still kind of brittle. So if you had a very delicate part, it could break. This model uses ABS plastic, which, as we know, is a much more durable type of plastic. I've got yard arms that have the halyards attached for a modern warship, and I can bend it like this and it won't break. So, as a modeler, as you're reaching into your fine work and you're trying to, put some rigging in or add some detail, that makes a difference. It also makes a difference as you're assembling these kits. Okay. Here you go. So here's the example of the SL on the left and the MSL on the right. And then here is an example. This is a photograph. This is a commonly used, it's a machine called an Elegoo, which is really popular right now. And you can see the spaghetti that's coming out of the resin. I mean, it really looks like a science fiction movie. You expect the alien to jump out and bite your head off. And here's some of that structure. The reason why you have all that structure is you need to make sure that it prints faithfully and that it flows into all those little details. So I'll show you other pictures but I'll pass this around, and that's the ABS material. This, in this case, was a cage that was built around this part. This part had all those filaments, and it sat in the cage like this. And that was just to protect it after it was pulled out and handled, because there's a lot of delicate parts, potentially, even with the ABS, and I'll pass that around. In 3D printing, there's also some flexible resins they can work with, but for modeling purposes, we don't use that. Okay, next slide. The printing method and resolution will also determine how much cleanup is required. In the America's Cup gallery, my diorama with the two America's Cup boats, has a chase boat, the official boat. And that official boat is 3D printed, and I bought it from a vendor in Spain at the time. And the museum bought it. And it was very hard. It was like ABS plastic, but it had a lot of striations in it, the way it was built up. And it took me forever I couldn't sand it. I literally filed it. And then I hit it with a lot of primer to kind of fill in the valleys. I would never work with that substance again. You may need to wash it to remove the residues. And in some cases, the 3D print that's in the back, the SL and the MSL, that gets all washed and everything else. But trust me, you probably want to hit it again with some alcohol or something, just to make sure. They're very hard to file and sand, with the ABS in particular. Ask me how I know. And most solvents won't work. So you can't buy, can't think of the active ingredient in most styrene glues, but it won't work on this. You're going to have to either epoxy it, super glue it, or what I've been told recently is UV cured resins will also work. The issue is with super glue, of course, super glue doesn't take a torque very well. It will pop. Epoxies will take more of that torque, but you can't rely on it to just be the glue itself. You're going to need to reinforce that joint. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Okay. So, the ship I'm going to primarily talk about is Baku, which was the fourth hull of the Kiev class. The last one, and it didn't look like the other ships of the class because it was already carrying the antennas, the electronics for the Kuznetsov, which was their full carrier. This was a heavy aircraft cruiser. It was called that so it could get through the Turkish Straits because of the Montreux Convention. So, yeah, lawyers were involved, and everybody turned a blind eye as the Russians built aircraft carriers. So this is how it came. 4 pieces of hull and everything else. That is a MSL print job. And you can imagine that coming out of the bath, but the detail, and I've had this model here before, is eye water. And that gives you an idea, once you get it all cleaned up, how good it can be. Now, that said, this model's got issues with regards to research. Talk about that. So, but I wanted to show you a couple of things. One is, this is a low resolution spool print. And if you look at it, and I'll pass this around, just be careful with it. You can see all the striations and all the issues with this model. I got very excited about this. This is a buoy tender, Coast Guard buoy tender, but it had also been a Navy or Army supply vessel during the war and then post-war. And so they had several iterations, but this iteration is a Coast Guard buoy tender.
I can see them from here.
And you can see it from there, but I'll pass that around. I'll start it this way, and you can take a look at that. And once I got it and I started looking at it, I was like, oh my goodness. I'm back to that pilot boat again, where I'm going to need to use a lot of sanding and filler and everything else to make that acceptable. Now, this model, and I won't pass this around, but it'll be up here, is one of those quirky French dreadnoughts. In this case, it's the Bouvet, and with the extreme tumble home. So building a model, well, you can get the lines. They're available through the National Maritime Museum of France. But to build this would be, I'm happy to build it this way. I wouldn't sit down and try to lay up a hull to try to build this model any other way. But I would love to build it. This model uses 2 techniques. The hull itself uses the filament buildup. The other uses the SL. So all the components use and these are very nice quality, durable ABS resin. I wish the hull was the same way, but it's not. So, and I bought this off of eBay, and the gentleman offered this for a short time, and I don't think it's available anymore. He also did a French monitor, but you'll be able to come up and see the difference. That's going to have some challenges too, but it's not nearly as challenging as that buoy tender. So, the first 3D printed model I bought is this one, USS Smith in 1/200 scale. So very early destroyer, pretty excited about it. Fit is exceptional. It's made of, again, if it's a white ABS or it's maybe like a nylon, but it's got transverse bulkheads printed in. So you don't have to worry about the hull flexing or anything else. The one thing that's interesting about this model is what they left off. So, but the fit is exceptional, just snaps right in. They give you a lot of detail. And I was very excited by it until I realized what they did not faithfully replicate was these ships had a very cambered deck to shed water. These are nice, flat, modern destroyer decks. Now, other companies like Dragon Models has done camber on their injection molded models, and resin companies have done torpedo boats and stuff with proper camber. But if you're interested in Civil War monitors, none of the kits out there have any camber. And in some cases, some of the ships, it's very noticeable. But the detail's really, really good on this. The other thing that they left off was the hull penetrations for the shaft. They're shown in the instructions and photos, but they never gave you the pieces to do the hull penetration. And they're pretty noticeable because it's a very narrow hull, so you had these protuberances. So I happen to have, this is 1/200 scale, I happen to have leftovers from the Scharnhorst. that I'm going to make work. So anyway, so you get a chance to take a look at that. I started tackling this. I've been dying to. I bought this about this time last year, but I've been busy with the convention planning, dying to tackle this. So right after the convention, I jumped into it. First thing I wanted to do was assemble the hull. Well, the first thing I did was I took the lower superstructure, and there's another upper superstructure in a cage right now that I have not removed yet because it is so delicate.
Is the cage just for protection, or is it maturing or gelling somewhere?
No, that's just for protection. If you see at the bottom, that's the bed plate that it prints off of. So it was printing like this. And the issue then becomes, and I had that issue with this, as you're removing all this structure, if it's a solid attachment to something that's not fragile, you literally just reach in and twist it and pull it right off. But when you start talking about the ends of standpipes and outriggers and stuff like that, then I use a very fine cutting tool. In this case, I got it off a T-Mu. Very fine nippers to go in there, because the problem is you don't know where the support ends and the detail you want to keep starts. So you have to be very careful. Ask me how I know, because I have to replace some king posts on this because I nipped them off thinking they were support links. But this will sit on top of that. So for now, I don't want to remove it. So I'm leaving it in its cage, so to speak. So you get an idea of what it took. First, I took the big cage off, and then I started pulling away all of this support. It's a lot. It's a lot of waste, a lot of plastic waste. To Gene's point, if it was all white metal, you could melt it all down and reuse it, but it's not. Okay, next slide, please. What you end up with, in order to get this faithfully replicated, then you have a lot of attachment points on the inside, and you'll see them. They're little nubs. They're not visible. Don't worry about it. Just snap them off and leave it. Unless you're Gene and you're going to put wainscoting in there and you're going to build out all the cabins and everything else. Now, like I said, this was printed in 4 parts. What you're looking at here is the bow, right here. You can see how much lattice was used. So as it was printing, and it was printing this way, the flow point would reach then all the details. Okay, so there's side angle. Okay, next. Okay, and then another angle. If you look at the front, though, you can see how much detail, including the crest, the aviation crest for the Soviet Navy, right there on the bow, and the stars that were required on Soviet warships. Italian warships also carry stars on them. So that detail, and then you can see here where I took one of those Japanese saws and I cut the bed plate away. You got a nice clean cut. You have to just be careful. I stayed to the bed plate so you get because if I was going to err, I wanted to err on the side of the bed plate, not into the hull. But I was able to get a clean cut. But if you look underneath, they had engineered supports. Here's an extra deck. Look how thick that resin is. These supports help keep things from sagging. To be honest, with this wall thickness, nothing's going to sag, but that's beside the point. And then you can see, to run all the details, I had to rip all that out as well. I didn't have to, but I did. Okay? And then here was another section of the hull. So what I ended up with was going to be 3 butt joints. And to me, 3 butt joints, given any kind of torque or anything else, was not acceptable. So what I did was I went ahead and epoxied in alignment tabs made out of styrene, thick styrene. The primary reason was to make sure I got the hull aligned. And in any process, you're not going to get a perfect print that they completely line up. But I think I did a pretty good job minimizing the steps in the hull. Because if you have a step, pronounced step, then you have to sand that away. But if you look at this hull, it's got, they printed all the boat davits and stuff. Here are the fin stabilizers. Here's the sonar dome. These, I think, are the reactor intakes. I cannot find a picture of the underside of this class of ship. Don't know why. It's like you'll go find the intake scoops on a nuclear carrier in the United States. If you have them, you should be arrested. So that's what I did to align. And I used 5-minute epoxy so I could adjust it as I'm gluing it. And then I was clamping to make sure I didn't have a shift. And it worked pretty well, I have to say. I did have a couple of cases where the tabs popped off the resin because the resin is so smooth. You really kind of need to rough it up a little bit, maybe a Dremel tool, just give it a little tooth. But I didn't think about doing that.
Does styrene, I know you said you use 5-minute epoxy.
Mm-hmm.
That is styrene would also, styrene's plastic.
No, styrene glue will not work on any of this. The active ingredient will not attack ABS. So the only thing you do with ABS is if is epoxy it. Now, or you can use these 5-minute, you can use these resins. And I brought in an example. I just bought this kit off of Amazon, and it's this UV resin. And then they give you this nice little tool that unfortunately does not have a battery, so it has to stay plugged in. But you can then set it over the object you're curing. The reason I got this is I read an article or a post online talking about filling these gaps. I was just going to do it with super glue. They recommended this resin because the resin actually is more sandable than super glue. Once you've cured super glue, it's very hard to sand. You have to hit it while it's still fresh. Okay, next. So, one of the design flaws with this kit, and there are several, is, one thing I don't know is the skeg back here. To me, that should be hydrodynamically tapered. But again, I can't find a photo showing that skeg. So right now it's flat, and I'm probably just going to leave it flat. Because no other modeler is going to go, oh, your skeg needs to be tapered. As I mentioned, the boat davits are very well done. And I should be using the camera, shouldn't I?
Well, he's showing the slides.
Oh, so
we don't have a
Okay.
picture-in-picture thing going on.
So what I didn't like about this...
Oh, it does? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I was wrong.
So one thing I didn't like about this kit is there's mooring stations back here. And they were just printed in about 1/2 inch, and that was it. They stopped. The problem is, in reality, that's an L-shaped compartment. So you can walk, and there's a capstan that sits at the corner, so you can render a line from either direction. So I decided, because I had nothing else to do, to open that up all the way. Now, I'm doing that, working through the trunk here, from this end, and from the outside. So it was challenging. I'm not exactly happy with the result because, to be honest, this opening is narrower than the actual overhead in that compartment would be up higher. So if you put a little figure there, they're doing this. They're hunching over to get in there. But again, who's going to call me on it? I don't know. The real issue is that's the real end, the back end of the Baku. What it has, and I don't have a laser pointer, but the first arrow I show you, this is a smooth transom. They give you the raised shield for the logo for the Soviet Navy. The more narrow rectangle, it should be a large door, that a split door that opens up, and a variable depth sonar rides that, what you see as a shiv at the bottom, so it's lowered out and then it's towed by the ship. None of that's represented. So I'm going to have to scribe the door, and then I'm going to have to open that up a little bit and put the shiv in. Not too challenging. What's more challenging is the shape that's painted black. That's actually concave, and it's lined with rubber stripping. And I think the function is so you can put a tugboat up against the stern. Don't know any other reason why you would do that, but it's missing from this model. Now, I built another model by Trumpeter, and it was missing too. So it's not, but this was made in China. 2 of the survivors are sitting in China. Why they didn't go look at it and figure it out? But I figured it out from online resources. So anyway, this is going to be a challenge because I'm going to have to then take a motor tool and concave it out. I don't really want to. So you can see here where I chipped a catwalk as I was cutting this here. So I'll just have to go in and build it. What is it? They say a good modeler knows how to hide his mistakes. So anyway, I love the subject. I followed the Kiev back in the 80s. So to finally get a Kiev, even though it's not the one I wanted, it's the last one in the class, but there's advantages to doing the last one in the class. So I think it's going to be a really nice build-up. It's a big model, but to get from point A to point B took more effort than I was expecting, given the quality of this model coming from China as well. So that is what I have prepared to talk about. I'm subject to your questions. That concludes my presentation.
You mentioned the flexible material that you wouldn't use.
Mm-hmm.
Can you flex it and it stays in position, or it springs back?
No, it springs back.
Okay.
So they use it for like kids' toys or something like that. You needed to give.
I want my model to be a diorama, and I don't want to have every eel in the same twisted configuration. I also don't want to come up with 12 different models to print out.
Yes.
I'm not sure how I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Gene has some ideas. But
Okay. Gene always has ideas.
You said a lot about cheating, and it's a popular term now in a lot of model making because we have all the 3D printing, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe in that. If you look at Crabtree ships, the last one of which was finished in 1949, not too long ago, and then look at the same ship that we would build today, the technical differences from the tools and techniques that he had and the information that he had compared to what we would have today, you could call what we're doing today cheating also.
Yes.
But it's an evolution, just like America's Cup ships, yachts and such. And you look at multi-hulls now. That's right, or single hull.
Yeah, if you look at the current catamaran configuration, that doesn't look like USS America. It doesn't look like a J-boat. That's cheating. They should be waterplaning instead of foiled. But yeah, Jack bobbing. I brought in the resin model, and Jack was like, because if you didn't set up a rope walk and you didn't make your own tar, and you didn't caulk. Jack was a phenomenal modeler, and it was my privilege to know him. But
do you think he was serious or just giving you a hard time?
No, Jack was serious. Jack was serious. Now, what I loved about Bob Comet was Bob Comet would just go with the punches. Whatever the new technology was, Bob was okay. So, but Jack was, sorry, I'm dialing my way back machine there.
Yeah. On the topic of ABS versus spring, is ABS spring or liquid?
Well, in this case, it's a liquid form. I think you can also get it as ABS. I think it's also as a string. It's a plastic. You just need to heat it up with the string in order to get it to bond to the next layer. And I think that's what they did here with this model. Is I think that's ABS because this is certainly a tough model. I think it's also hollow inside. The nice thing about 3D printing is you can tell it where to print and where not to print. So if you want a hollow so it doesn't weigh too much, this model is very lightweight. But again, and it's got the deck planks faithfully represented, but there's a little bit of coarseness on it. It would not be there if it was a cast resin hull.
Is there, you said you buy some of the stuff from eBay. Are there companies on eBay you can stay away from because the quality is like food vendor?
Yeah. This, and I don't remember the name of the company I got this from. I'm not buying any more products from this guy. He offers some interesting things, but the amount of work, and it's not just his ships, but his buildings as well. But I'm an N scaler, so to find a ship like this, an N scale, pretty cool, because if not, you're going to build Lindbergh's, bobtail cruiser, if you remember that kit, which was an LCI or something like LC. It was a LCM to get in the right scale. But I'm not going to put this on a river layout. I think I'm just going to build it as a diorama, tending buoys. And they give you buoys to tend with it, but I've got some better buoys from a Canadian company that are cast resin. But I think that'd be an interesting diorama. It's a subject you don't see very often. We all tend to focus on warships, because guns are cool.
A manufacturer called Art Farms sound familiar to you?
Art Farms? Art?
Like, ARK.
Oh, ARK. Yeah, I've heard of them. I don't know. I bought this before the tariffs last year, and I paid about $200 for it, which I thought was a pretty good price given all the detail. Somebody in that same production makes a Sverdlov cruiser, they were Italian cruisers that weren't finished by the end of the war, and the Russians took them. I actually take that back. That was the battleships. The Russians actually had paid the Italians to design those cruisers for them. And so they were always very good looking ships, and they survived as flagships. But those ships run about $350, so I haven't bought one. And then the tariffs threw a whole wrench in this. It's settled back down again, but you have to know what you're doing with regards to shopping. This one is now sold in 1/350th in injection molding, but I think it's got the same issue with the camber on it. So how do I fix this, or do I just build it with a flat deck and live with it?
You're gonna get into cat work, or you?
Oh, bite your tongue. The other thing I thought about doing is scoring the back underside of that, and then flexing it a little bit, and then just putting strip styrene around the edge, so it accounts for the shortened distance. So that's what I thought about doing. I just have to look at the deck furniture to see if that's going to throw things off.
How does this material behave with heating?
Good question. I don't know in terms of, because typical resins, if you heat a resin, it will return back to its previous state. So if you get a resin that is warped, you can put it in the oven about 200 degrees, heat it up, not too much, and then you can gently put it back into its position, and it will stay there.
Actually, even hot water.
Hot water too.
Gotten some barrels of something that assumed a list, or and in hot water, and it kind of sprung back.
Yeah, it depends on the type of material, but in terms of heat with regards to this, I have not had not a need to play with it.
Yeah.
I thought I might with this, but it didn't turn out. And actually, I got my deck nice and level here.
Yeah, I mean, they are pretty brittle, and I have to almost be melting. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you played around with that.
No, I haven't.
Out there, right?
Well, I hope that was helpful, give you a little bit of insight how the other half or another part of the hobby lives.
there are a lot of people here who are relatively new, and we've been coming in the front doors for some time now. If you'll go to the America's Cup Gallery, you'll see a diorama, oceanorama, whatever, of two of the yachts in the 13th America's Cup. Charles and a partner built the water for that exhibit. So we got his name in brass on the plaque.
I was on the wall,
so-
then they remodeled the wall, and I'm not on the wall.
It's a very good representation.
I was going to go in there and say, you know, I know Gene. I should be back on the wall. But I didn't. No, and then, in fact, that was the museum had acquired the two models, and then they wanted to do some kind of dynamic interpretation of models. And so that's where, and my friend Bill Kluge, who did all the artwork for the National Convention, he helped me as we sculpt the base, and then I put all the little figures in the boats. Yeah, that's fun. That's a good project.
Any questions online?
Nope, thank you very much.
We're willing to go back to show and tell for 3 to 5 minutes now that we have the projector running again.
Yeah,
And
yeah, we can
everyone
do that. If
burst
you
into
had
it.
something to
Yeah.
show. Yeah. Yeah, might as well.
Thanks, Charles.